Thank you for joining us. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator here at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you another art demonstration in partnership with the DuPage Art League. Founded over 60 years ago, the DuPage Art League is dedicated to promoting and encouraging the visual arts through classes, workshops, gallery exhibits, and public programs such as this one. We are grateful to the DuPage Art League for arranging tonight's demonstration by artist Jennifer Hauser. Jennifer Hauser is a Chicago area ink and colored pencil artist. She has a degree in trumpet performance from DePaul University. After completing her BA in music, she earned a Master of Architecture degree from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Today, she's an architect by day and artist by night. Her whimsical art depicts a fanciful vision of wildlife as an alternate reality to the human experience. It is bold, full of color and humor, and provides a momentary escape from the hustle of the everyday world. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Okay. All right, great. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm Jennifer, and I zigzagged my way into kind of being an artist, I guess. Growing up, I always did a lot of drawing and doodling, but I got a music degree. Moved to Chicago from living on a farm in northern Wisconsin. But all through that time, I always did a lot of drawings. And when I got out of music school, I realized that was not quite the career I wanted to do. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I kind of did a lot of odd jobs. I was a file clerk. I was an administrative assistant, worked in a frame shop. And then I decided I'd go to architecture school because it seemed like the next best thing to being an artist. And now I still do art while I do architecture. So I think my childhood growing up in Wisconsin, it was a huge influence on me. We spent a lot of time out in the woods, in the fields, running around. There wasn't a lot to do out there. There wasn't a lot of people out there. So I spent a lot of time by myself just drawing, and I still prefer it that way. I could probably live in the woods and not see a soul for days and be perfectly fine. So that's my backyard studio. My husband and I built that. And we jokingly call it Studio J. You can go to the next slide, I'm sorry. There's me in the studio. It's cleaner than normal there, though. If I pan to the back side, you would see a big pile of boards. It's really messy in there. So tonight I want to walk you through like sort of my process and my materials. So go to the next slide. So my materials, I buy masonite and stick it out in the backyard on a piece of cardboard, and then I prime it with primer and sand it and prime it again. I usually do 2 or 3 coats of that. Not very exciting, but people are pretty confused a lot of times by the materials I'm using because it's a little unusual. The way I started using this material, yeah, I started out doing portraits, kind of really hyper realistic portraits and still lifes. And then I graduated to stained glass. And then I was doing cartoons, and I was working on a cartoon book. And then it was during the pandemic, and I got a little sad and I didn't want to finish my book. So I put it away and cleaned my studio, and I thought, what am I going to do next? I thought, well, I had this photograph of these trees from Wisconsin, and I thought, well, someday I'm going to draw them and reimagine them. So I started drawing these trees, and I just kept drawing them over and over in all different ways. And then I did these little postcards that I sent to all my friends and family with letters because it was a pandemic and everything sucked. And someone said, hey, you should turn that into a coloring book. So I did. And then I met a guy who was doing vending machine art. And he said, hey, maybe you want to do some vending machine art? And I'm like, okay, I could try that. And it was on masonite. They had taken an old cigarette machine and turned it into an art vending machine. So I started working on masonite, like how can I work with this material? That's where the primer came in, and my ink pens. So after I did that, it was a lot of fun. It was pretty cool. They just kept getting bigger. And then I added color and bunnies. Like the first trees did not have bunnies, so they felt like they were missing somebody. So anyways, you want to go to the next one?
What vending?
Oh, it was, they took an old cigarette machine and turned it into they refurbished it. And now it's a vending machine art. It's no longer a cigarette machine. It's up in Elgin, Side Street Studio Art. Yeah.
You put money in. What?
Yeah, I think they have tokens, but that's the idea. Pretty cool.
What's the masonite material typically cost?
I usually buy like 2 foot by 4 foot sheets, and I think at this point it's like $25 a sheet, maybe. So I usually start with a 5-second sketch, and they're usually about this big. They're not very big. And it's more for composition. What's the scale versus the board? Am I going to fill up the whole board? Am I going to do half a board? So you can see there is a resemblance, but it's pretty sloppy. If you go to the next one. Yeah, same thing there. They're really loose. I don't do a lot of prep work. I'm impatient. I don't like to do things twice. So we're going in cold. I have had to sand off boards when I made a mistake, or not make a mistake, but I just didn't like how it's turning out. And the only way to start over is sand the board down and start over. Next one. Yeah, same thing. You can see I took a little turn here. I decided not to do a worm tunnel. I made all the carrots worm houses. And then I added bunnies later. Like there's a bunny there, but I do a lot of design as I'm doing it too. I have that outline and then I fill in all the details. And as I'm drawing, I get more ideas. So I'd start adding little things as I go. The next one. Same there. I was lazy, so I didn't do a title on it. That takes a long time to do the titles because you have to print out the words and transfer them and then draw it very carefully. And some days I'm really lazy and I'm like, I'm not doing it today. So next one. Yeah. So this one's a little bit more formal. I did that really quickie sketch, but this took a lot more planning because I'm trying to get these right with the animals so that they're all visible and whatever. That one's a little more planned out. A lot of them are very spontaneous, but that one's not so much. Next one. Oh yeah, I only did the bunny for that one. The next one. Oh, here we go. This one I liked because it shows a series of starting pretty much through the process and the coloring. And if you go to the next one, we get the finished image.
Is that just ink and primer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm sorry, if you go back one. Oh, he asked me if it was just the ink on the primer. I forgot to repeat the question. I'm sorry. So yeah, this is just the ink drawing on the primer here, halfway through. And here's the finished with the ink. And then here's where I start coloring with the color pencil. You can see as I go. Like, and the lighter color pencil that's been blended. This is just the color pencil with no blending. So you can see when you do the color pencil and then the blending, it changes dramatically the colors. You can go to the next one. I'm sorry. So here's the finished work. You can really tell once the color's all on there, it really transforms it. Next one. Oh yeah. Oh, here we go. I did include that one. This one took me a really long time to do. And I usually only draw in the studio, but I had to bring this one in the house because I had to finish it for something. And so I spent evenings in the house with this thing, getting it done. I made it by one day. Anyways, this one was also a little more structured because I did measure out the width of all the houses. So that one, I don't know, a little bit less or a little bit more formal than most of them. But still, all of this is really just as I went. I kind of figured it out. Killer bees, yeah. I think we're almost done. Just one last slide. Oh, no, I lied. There's more slides. This one, I couldn't find the sketch for this one, the preview sketch, but when I started this one, my only idea was I want to fill up the whole board, and you got to have the biggest, most important house in the middle. And then I just sort of started drawing. The next one, I thought we're almost done. And this one was more of a color study. I did this for a show. It was supposed to be all yellow, everything yellow. So I did that for a specific show, and it kind of worked out nice. So maybe I'll just do another yellow one again. We'll see. Next one. Oh, and this one also more structured. I just finished this one. Again, I had to measure out all the windows and stuff, so a lot more planning than I usually do. Usually it's just all freehand, but I had this idea, and I wanted it to be very structured looking. The next one, I think we're almost done now. We're not. I'm like, I'm sorry. This one, other than the title, was definitely all freehand though. I couldn't find the sketch for this one either, but it was basically just do the title and then go at it. And the next one, I think we could just go to the next one. The same. They're all this more of the same. Yeah, these are the last two. This one was also very structured. I had to measure to get the wallpaper right. Anyways, I was going to show you my materials, and then try and get one whole sketch done so you could see the process of how I draw. Because I think that is more interesting to people than anything else. I don't know. It's sort of the feedback I get. Okay. So like I said, I work with the Masonite. It comes raw like this. I prime it in the backyard with the primer, like this, with this. And then it's got to be sanded some more. And this is a final product that we have here. I didn't show you my pens yet. They're Repeatograph pens. They're technical pens for drafting. I found these in architecture school and fell in love with them and have never stopped using them. Most of my classmates think I'm insane. So I figured I would draw you one of my 5-second sketches and then go to town.
Do you mind repeating the name of the pen?
Repeatograph?
Repeatograph.
Yeah.
Okay. And a question about sanding the masonite. How do you know when the sanding, you've done enough sanding?
Could you have a nice?
So if you could repeat the question,
I'm
or
sorry, yeah.
Regarding sanding the masonite.
Yeah.
How do you know when you've sanded it enough?
Yeah, you know when you have a nice consistent color, you don't see any of the board color coming through, and it's nice and smooth. I mean, it really feels almost like laminate when it's done. It's really smooth. Yes.
You said the magic word masonite. I mean, why not clay board or hot press illustration board? I mean, you're talking pen and ink on a surface. So how many coats of primer do you whiten masonite because of the rigidity? You know, I think I'd like to hear more about that.
It's I usually 2 or 3 coats of primer. And masonite, like I said, I just started using it because of the vending machine art, and it worked so nicely, especially when I started using color on it. It just ends up with so much more depth. I just fell in love with it as a material. I draw on paper sometimes, but it doesn't have the same magic, I guess, for me. Oh,
That the way for the mic.
I guess so.
Love your work. You should probably make a puzzle out of some of them. Anyways, my question for you is, do you draw from a photo, from your imagination, or on location?
In my studio is the only location pretty much, and from my imagination, it's all up here. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna draw my 5-second sketch. I've got a mark on the table so you guys can see it, or so I don't get off the mark. So usually I start with like, what's the shape of the board? What do I want my tree to look like? Oh, I don't know. I'll just draw like a winky looking tree here. You know, maybe I want a window here, a door like that. And then that's probably what we're gonna do. You can see it up there, sorry. All right. So like I said, I've got my repeated graph. I'm gonna start drawing. And these have different pen or tip sizes. So once you started drawing in one tip size, you wanna stick to it. Because otherwise your drawing will be lopsided and strange looking. So I usually just start really loose. There's really no real magic to it. And my sister-in-law makes fun of me for this, but I do what I call a double line technique. That basically trace over what I've done. And I use kind of squiggly lines. And to me, the whole reason for that is it gives it a little bit of texture and a little bit more dimension. So it's not that I can't trace nicer. It's that I think it's more interesting when I don't. So I intentionally go back over the profile. And depending on how the drawing goes, I might come back and do it some more. Because sometimes I feel like, oh, the tree dies or, blends into the background too much and you can't really see it. And the other thing is the ink smears. So I smeared this because you got to be careful, but I'm just going to work those smears into the drawing and you'll never see it when it's done. So I just start drawing in my bark lines. And there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. I like the trees to look kind of gnarly. So I give them a lot of texture. And I want the windows to stand out. So I usually go around those a lot. And I'm going to come back and visit those later. But this is just mostly laying out what I had already did in my 5-second sketch. So I'm going to put in my crooked stairs. And I just kind of work back and forth on the sheet or the board. I kind of mix it up. Like I'll work in one little section for a while and then I'll go over to another section. And it really, I think it's very intuitive. Some days I'm like, oh, I need to put in a lot of flowers. And some days I'm like, no, you know what? Enough with the flowers. Maybe we're going to just do grass today. Like I said, it's I mean, that's partly why I think I like doing it so much is, it's just really relaxing to just sit down and draw. I don't have to talk to anybody on the phone about what might have gone wrong in their day. Um, And as you could probably tell, I used to doodle a lot. So these are definitely reminiscent of doodles. You just, where you just sort of draw what's in your head, or sometimes you're not even thinking about much when you do it. This is kind of a quick one because it's small. But the same process works with the larger drawings. There though, because there's so much going on in the drawing and it's so large, I can add I can hide little animals, little different things in the drawings. So I think that's why the larger ones are so much more interesting to me, because you can just really add a lot of detail and hide things that people have to come back and look for. And I do usually work, I think partly because the ink has to dry and you don't want to smear it, but I do frequently just work left to right. It saves me a lot of grief from having to try and fix all the smears that could happen, especially on the really large drawings. Yeah, I covered up my smear. As you can see, I do frequently just keep doing the same double lines, especially over like my leaves. Maybe not the bark, but the leaves. It makes them stand out a little bit more.
Jennifer, we've got another question back here.
Oh, sure.
So when you're working small, I'm assuming you're using a smaller pen point. So let's say you go to a double-sized drawing, do you increase your pen size to make it thicker? So when you reduce it or not, it looks right? I mean, you change your size of your pen by the drawing you're working on, small versus large?
I do frequently, yeah. I have to be honest though, like this is the smallest pen point I'm using right now because the even smaller ones they were just too frustrating.
So that's the question. What is the smallest pen point that you work with? I use rapidiographs and I hate them, but I love using them, so I know the feeling.
It's great. It's the smallest one you can get, but I've gone through so many of those that I quit using them lately. Once in a while, I'll pull them out for some like special detail. Like if I'm doing a tree section, I'll use that one. But this one, what point is this? This is the smallest one I'm using these days. The next one up is this gray one, which is 0.35. This one is, I can't see that. It's worn off. But I do, if I'm doing a bigger drawing, I go to the bigger one. Just because when you start getting that large, you can't see all that detail very well anyway. And I found myself just going like over things so much to get different line weights that it didn't make sense to stick with the thinner point.
Jennifer, from at home, someone's asking if the pens have waterproof ink.
Yep. Yes, it's all waterproof ink.
Thank you.
It's your standard India ink that you buy in the little, I don't know, they're like these square little bottles. So even though I use my double line technique, as I like to call it, I do frequently go back over the tree trunk as I'm doing it so it stands out just a little bit. And like I do kind of zigzag and keep it rough because I like a more gnarly looking surface or texture on the edges. Sometimes if the pen doesn't go in the direction I intended it, I just work it in. I don't get too crazy if there's a mistake. Because none of this is like straight lines anyway. None of this is real. So you can make it look like whatever you want. No.
Has to be a nice change from architecture.
Well, that's one of the reasons
So someone mentioned that it's a change from what you do during the day as architecture.
absolutely. In most things in life, actually, really, right? So you have to be very careful about a lot of stuff you do. This you don't. So that is really part of the fun of it. You just, go based on your gut.
Jennifer, someone just was logging in. Can you repeat the name of the pen or the brand that you're using?
Sure, yes, it's a Rapidograph technical pen. They're the kind of pens that they used to use for drafting. And they're pretty finicky. Like I said, the finer points that I used to use a lot, they clog so much. Especially like with the primed surface. If you don't have a really nice smooth primed surface, I think when you're working with the pen, it'll scrape off a little bit of the primer, force it into the tip there, and then your pen will clog. And sometimes I've ruined some pens that way. You never can get them unclogged with those really fine points. And they're kind of expensive, so you don't want to just start going through them like tissue paper, because I mean, to buy a new pen tip, it's like $30. So I'm pretty careful with my pens. For that reason, I've had to replace a ton of them. And one time I was in the studio and a spider crawled across my foot. It was summertime and I had sandals on. And it scared me and my pen fell off the table and landed upside down and the whole tip broke off. And it was during the pandemic and they were out of stock. And it took me like 6 weeks to get a new pen tip. I was not happy because it was right in the middle of the drawing that I had started and I didn't have any spares for that size. So I just had to put that drawing on hold while I was waiting for a new pen tip. Very devastating. Usually I'm kind of a nerd though. I try to have like spares of everything. I don't know. I think once I jumped and then the pen fell, I was too focused on the pen to focus on if the spider was still there. So the other thing I like to think about when I'm doing these drawings, because they are kind of loose, is I really like things that are not equal. Like, so I like lopsided drawings, I guess is the best way to do it. So they need to have a good composition, but I like to think about, okay, you've got a rogue flower, or you get one leaf off on the side somewhere. Things don't have to be in equilibrium. It's more interesting if they're not.
Jen, I have a question.
Sure.
Have you ever tried fountain pens or dip pens?
I have not. I'm not saying I won't. I haven't.
Could give you some options, for those expensive rapidographs.
Yeah, right. And if you look here on the corner of this board that I'm working on, you see that some of these pen strokes here are much thicker, and it comes down to the finish of the board. The finish of the board is a little inconsistent, and that's kind of part of the fun, is that you can't always tell the quality of the board, if I've prepared it really well or not until you get into the drawing sometimes. I've had it where I've tried to draw on it, the drawing or the board was too smooth, the ink won't stick. So I try and go back now and lightly sand them before I do any drawings. You don't want them too perfect. And then sometimes they're really rough and you don't really know until you're halfway through a drawing that you hit a rough patch. I still kind of go with the board, like, all right, we can work with this. I used to get really frustrated by that because I wanted all the boards perfect and I didn't want any inconsistencies, but I found that that's kind of the fun of the material a little bit. It adds a little bit more interest. And that it's okay if it's not perfect.
I did look up the name and company that makes that pen and put it in the chat for those at home. We've got another question here.
Okay.
Hi, Jen. So I was just wondering, how often do you work, and is it all start to finish, like finished pieces like this?
Typically, yeah, I work mostly on the weekends. I do little drawings like this. I'll do in front of the TV, just the drawing part, and then color them later. Once I start coloring, I usually try to follow all the way through and get a drawing done. I don't have like 20 half-done drawings. I like sort of just get through it. I like having finished stuff. Okay.
Yes, this is the second time I've seen your work. And it wasn't until today that I thought of an artist that reminds me of the work that you do is Edward Gorey. So if you're familiar with
Okay.
his work. And I mean, mainly his work is in pen and ink, just black and white. There's never any color unless you see it on on TV. And I just like the way it's so similar to that because I like his work.
Well, thank you. I know Edward Gorey.
Yeah.
Well, his work, not him personally, but him and I grew up together.
The Waymans.
Yeah.
Well, and you exhibited your work in the library's gallery space, January? I think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me in January. Yeah, the little ones are kind of fun because they're kind of quick to do.
So,
Jennifer, someone at home is asking, what is your favorite brand of ink?
I don't even know. I probably use I think it's the Conair I usually use. I think that's what it is, or is it Repeatograph ink? I think it may be Repeatograph. But I mean, the ink, there's really nothing too special that I think about with the ink. It just needs to be black and it needs to work. I don't get too hung up on the ink. I think as a kid, like we did not have art supplies around. So I was used to finding whatever. And like, if there was any pencil that had the qualities that I liked the really soft leads. I would steal them. And I'm kind of still that way. Like if I find something I like, I just stick to it and I don't get too hung up on if it's a name brand or not. Same as pens and markers. I try not to steal people's pens and markers anymore, but like if I'm shopping and I see something that I think might be neat, that's what I go for. I don't, like some people get really sort of hung up on brands or whatever. I don't. I do use the Prismacolor color pencils, but if they don't have the color I want, I will go to another brand. And partly why I stick with Prismacolor is because I know what to expect, right? Kind of gets rid of the unknown. Element that you can sometimes run across. Sometimes,
So someone's asking if you use different colored pens?
yeah. It would be the ink that you buy in like the little bottles, but I have done that. I don't too much just because I go back with color pencils, so the color pens don't really have the same impact as the line drawings with the color coming back and color penciling on. But I did like a stippling with the colored ink for the sky on one a few years ago. And I did like a background and wallpaper that was also in color ink. So I have used it, just not very often. I'm just trying to make sure that even when I'm answering questions, I'm still drawing. So I can get this done. That's my goal. I want to get this 100% finished drawing. I won't be able to color it all. But I thought it would be fun if you saw the whole drawing be completed. the drawing portion, which is the fastest part of the drawing. Or the work. Coloring takes a pretty long time.
Jennifer,
Mhm.
do you have a favorite source for your supplies?
No, I mean, Dick Book is pretty convenient, but it's really based on convenience. I find there's not like a ton of art stores anymore.
I would agree.
Um, like there's somebody named Jerry that has an art store. I go to his stuff sometimes. But yeah, I don't really have any loyalties other than if I want something, I look till I find it.
Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about the choices that you're making compositionally?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I basically am just, I guess trying to just fill in the space. And I think, well, I like having a big bunch of flowers in the front, and then I gotta kind of weave this bark together so it's sort of a cohesive drawing. I've gotten better at this as I've done it, as far as what I think looks good. I know some of my earlier tree drawings, I wasn't sure like how to terminate the lines or work around the windows. I get to a point where I was like, oh, I'm stuck. This doesn't look good, and I don't know where to, terminate these lines. And I think I was too focused on them going up and down and being complete. And I'm like, well, I don't have to. I can keep just doing a pattern and a texture, and it can end where it ends. So I'm really trying to fill in the whole surface of the tree right now with this, I guess, bark texture. And I want to do it in such a way that it's sort of a consistent texture across the entire drawing so that it doesn't look awkward. Like they say that if you start a drawing, you should get it all done in one day. And that doesn't always happen for me, but the idea is that you might draw something completely different the next day because of your mood. Which is true, but I've gotten better where I can sort of stick to the mood I started in. But basically I'm just trying to fill the texture in so that it looks like it works. It's consistent. And I guess make sense. And the bigger drawings, like I'll think more like, oh, like the one that was on the description of this demonstration with the big tree, like halfway through, I'm like, oh, I should put little carrot door handles on the door. That was like something I thought about afterwards. Hot cicada summer, like halfway through that one, I'm like, oh, I should have clotheslines with all the cicada, shells hanging on them like they're doing their laundry. It just sort of happens as I'm working on the drawings. And the bigger drawings, because they are so big and so dense, there is an opportunity to add all that in there as I'm working, because those drawings, probably take me 2 days for like those bigger ones.
Jen, I have a question. In some of your finished pieces, you have the title as part of the piece. Can you talk a little bit about how you do the lettering for that?
Yeah, that takes a little longer, so I didn't do that tonight. But usually what I do is I'll print out whatever I decide I wanted that title to be. And then I will take like graphite and scribble on the back so that it's a solid graphite background. And then I trace over the letters onto the masonite, so it leaves like a graphite image of the title, and then I come back over and draw it with the ink over the tracing. That's fairly tedious to do a nice job on. And also you have to be careful because that graphite will also clog up your pen. It'll stick in there. So I don't like to use too much of that. I probably stick mostly to the title for that. Once in a while on the more complex pieces, I will do a little bit of a sketch here and there, just a really quickie outline of something. But the graphite does impact the pens. So I don't do too much of that. And it's a little more fun to just be kind of loosey-goosey and free. So a lot of times for some of the elements, like the leaves and stuff, I like to go back and highlight them even further so that they stand out from the background a little bit. So you'll see that I frequently come back and darken them back up. That's another thing architects do. It's all about the line weights. If you talk to an architect, they'll say, oh, the line weights are all wrong.
Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about your characters, the animals that you add, and how you choose them and when they appear in the piece?
Yeah, I usually stick the animals in at the end. And they go in the windows. A lot of it depends on if it's a planned out piece as far as is there something going on in the drawing or is it just a simple drawing with not much of a story behind it. I frequently do bunnies. I find the bunnies to be kind of fun because they can be really simple drawings, but a lot of expression because of the ears. The ears can be sort of the mood setter for the bunny, I guess. But then I started sticking cats and stuff in there too. I would say the bunnies are my favorite. Those seem to be the most popular characters that I do. And they really started because the early trees did not have any animals in them, and they just seemed like they were missing something. You know, just a weird tree with no animals or people just didn't seem to make sense. So the bunnies started just being sort of tossed in there, and then they were kind of a hit. Everybody kind of liked the bunnies. And then as you do that, you start thinking about, oh, what would the bunnies be doing? And you start building your drawings around sort of a storyline about the creatures in it. I like to think of them as staring out and looking at us, sort of like voyeurs. And they've got like growing carrots all over the place, and they get their little Amazon packages at the door. So I don't know, I like to think of them sort of like that. All right, so this is almost done. I feel like though it needs more something around it. I like my drawings to really fill up the page most of the time. You'll see I do like a lot of borders, and to me, it feels like it's containing the page, right? It's containing the image. I was gonna say like underwear. But that's probably not very nice. But I tend to like borders. I like to fill up the page. I don't like a big empty corner as a rule unless it serves the drawing. And I guess I think even though these are not really storybook illustrations, they do kind of have that feel. And I like to think about like those old fashioned storybooks where they do have like, the big letter at the top of the paragraph, and the letters and the image sort of waft together, and it's all contained sort of in that area. So it's like a package. I like to think of them sort of like that when I'm drawing. So
Jennifer, have you illustrated any books or considered writing stories for your characters?
I have. I did a comic book, which is obviously way different style of art than this is. And I think it would be really fun to do an illustrated book. I haven't though, and one of the things I think about is, well, I was talking to someone about this earlier today, is that is such a big commitment. I'd have to dedicate some serious time to that. And since right now, I just do this like on the weekends, that I haven't made that commitment yet to spend that much time on something. But it might, maybe it's in the future, because that would be a lot of fun. But I do like my big pictures to feel like there's a story in there, Right, so.
Since your drawings are so illustration-like, are there certain illustrators that you like or that have influenced your drawing?
Can't think of any off the top of my head, though. I've always really liked, storybooks as a kid. And if a book did not have good pictures, I didn't think it was a very good book. When I got older, I changed my mind a little bit, but as a kid, I was like, I would really be mesmerized by the pictures. And even when I bought books for my daughter when she was little, if it didn't have good pictures, forget about it. There's plenty of good stories out there that do have good pictures. I didn't feel like I needed to expose her to ugly pictures. Yeah, a lot of times the bunnies are just little guys looking out the window. Sometimes they're doing stuff, but I just, I'm not really that deep. that I really screwed up his ear. All right, so I feel like it's a little bit not quite as contained as I normally like them. So I like to add borders around sometimes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the aspects of positive and negative space as you're designing your drawing?
Yes. Let me think about that for a minute. I think I like mostly positive space. I guess I like the page really filled up usually. So some people like a lot of space. I don't. I feel like it needs to be sort of buckled in there. I think it adds to the search, right? If you're looking for what's in there, like all the little details, if it's all really compact, makes you feel like you have to look harder for it. Add a little thing here. So there. All right, I think we're done. I think I'm ahead of schedule. So we can start coloring this one. That was my whole goal, is to get through a whole drawing so that we could color it. And I picked out my colors in advance. I'll do that here, because coloring can, and picking the colors can take a while sometimes. I'm better at it now that I've been doing it a while. But the colors don't react to the masonite with the primer the way you would expect it to always. Some of them stick really well to the primer, some don't stick hardly at all. You see here, they're pretty bold on the paper, but when you put them here, they change. Excuse me, let me. This. So, and my color theory, not really a theory, but I like to take like a couple of browns and then I stick in like what I call my surprise colors. So here we have like a dark umber. This is pumpkin orange. This is, I think, black grape, espresso, and chestnut. And so the colors, I like them kind of opposite. And I usually for a tree trunk go with 5 colors. It's just sort of the system I worked out for myself. And I try to make sure that when I'm doing these, there's a big contrast between the colors that are next to each other. So you get a big clump of a dark spot or too many light spots. And I just start coloring like that. Oh, and if you get interrupted coloring, it's good to save I have another one I started in case I ran behind. I save them in baggies, my color scheme so that I don't mix them up later in case I forget. It doesn't usually happen because I usually just finish all the way through, but I do remember early on I started coloring and then I forgot the colors that I used and I really had some difficulty nailing that down. So I learned to save them in a baggie. I'm just organizing these so I'll do them in order. Yeah. So this is the really slow, tedious process. You guys might want to take a nap. I don't know. So, shoot. That's the other thing. Make sure you have spare pencils because some of these just break. If this one keeps doing this, I might pull another color. It was supposed to be this one. But basically, it's important to color in the lines. And I don't know if it really matters or not, but I usually, where my hand is, cover it up with paper. I'm assuming that the oils from my hand, especially on a really hot day, are gonna mess with the coloring. And you can see when I'm coloring now, this is a fairly chalky color. It looks kind of crusty on here. And the masonite has just enough texture where it's really hard to fill it all the way in a nice way. This is the part that took me a little while to work out, figure out a system for doing this. Because like the first couple I did, I think my boards were so smooth when I prepared them that I didn't have a lot of problems, but then some of my later boards weren't quite as nice, and I really struggled with the color, getting a nice finish, because if you look, I mean, it doesn't look very good like this. I'm gonna come back over this and blend it, and that's part of what takes so long. And it changes the whole colors, like these colors look pretty, lack of a better word, kind of gaudy together. But when you come back and smooth it out, it completely transforms them. Look at this one. And they also, like, the dark colors look really similar. Like this, there's not a lot of contrast, but when you go back and blend it, that's where you start seeing the contrast really nicely.
Jennifer, can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by blending?
Yeah, I have this colorless blender. It's basically like another color pencil but it's clear. I go back over it, and what it does is it scrapes off all the extra color pencil pigment that's sort of left on there. And it also works it into the surface, so you don't get any white spots. Like right now, there's little pockets of white that are not filled in. With the color pencil, it looks really rough. That will fill those in. And that's how you get the really nice, smooth surface. I'll just finish this color and then I'll come back and show you. As I worked on this too, I've gotten a little bit faster at it. Because as you're doing it, you don't have to get hung up on perfection from the onset. You can come back and you clean it up a little. The other thing I think about when I am doing the color is making sure you keep your color evenly distributed throughout the work. And you try not to get colors right next to each other that are the same. Part of the fun of the tree texture is the colors are opposites to each other. So it adds a lot of texture. Come back here in a second and blend this in, and you'll see it'll the color will look really different. Okay, so there's one little section there. I take this. And the first pencil I used, like I said, that texture is really chalky. And those are the hardest ones to work with because they, the pigment gets kind of gummed up. And you want to scrape it all off and blend it in. Take off my glasses for this.
Jennifer, do you specifically start with darks or lights?
I usually start with the dark on the outside of the tree. Just, I feel like makes the profile of the tree stand out a little bit. And like I said, I try to alternate the colors. So you got dark, light, or just even opposing colors. You know, and if like you start coloring and you follow one, like, I guess, line all the way up with the color, sometimes it dead ends unexpectedly. So I'll come back later and add like an extra leg of color somewhere so that it's more balanced. And I really like to use like colors that are really contrasting each other. Like I can tell this board has got a weird texture to it. These colors aren't blending very well, and that does happen sometimes. Or they just don't smooth out very good. And that's usually because the board is not as well prepared sometimes. And like it's kind of weird, there's really no way to know that until you start drawing and coloring, because when you look at it with your eye, it looks nice. When you feel it with your hand, it feels smooth, but then you start drawing, you're like, what is this? It's not blending. Some colors just automatically do that. But on this particular board, I'm going to say that I'm having the same sort of trouble with all of these colors. They're just not smoothing out nicely. So that impacts the character of the drawing when it's all done. Not saying that it's going to be a crap drawing, but it's just a different look. And I've done a lot of drawings where this does happen. You just keep working with it and it'll it works. You just end up with a little bit different thing than you think you're going to get in the beginning.
We have a couple more questions from our at-home audience. Do you think about warm versus cool colors? And do you design the colors to move the viewer's eye through the painting?
I do. You know, some days I am like, as I'm working, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to go with a nice blue color palette, you know, and base my color palette on that. And other days, you know, I want more of like this to me is a very fall color palette. So I do think about that, and I do, especially with the flowers, like when I start coloring the flowers, I put a lot of thought into what the colors are going to be, what's going to really pop and what's going to draw your eye in. And to me, the hardest color to think about is the background color. It can totally change your drawing. And the other thing about working in this medium is once you pick your color palette, you cannot undo it. That's the color palette. You can't change it. So, like, you just gotta follow it through the end of the drawing. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with, wrong colors in there. Sorry. What color do I want? I'll go back to this one. But like, you can't take this color off. The only way to do it is you've got to start over by sanding the board down and starting over. So I've started drawing sometimes on, oh, this is the worst color palette in the whole world. What was I thinking? But I'm in too deep, so I keep going. And then sometimes to my surprise, it turns out really great. And I'm like, oh, I misjudged these colors.
Can you tell us again what you're using to blend and smooth the colors?
Yes, it's a blenderless, or it's a colorless blender. So basically it looks like a piece of wax. So it's got the same kind of consistency as the color pencils. And it's like hard. So when you rub it over the surface of the color pencils, it'll smooth it out. It will scrape off excess pigment. And it'll work it into the surface of the masonite so that you get a nice, smooth, consistent coloring.
And do you ever layer 2 or 3 colors over each other, or do you keep each distinct?
I do layer them, not for the trees, usually the tree trunks, because I'm really trying to bring out that line pattern of the bark. But like for the leaves, I do usually 2 colors. For the sky or the background, I will sometimes do 3, maybe 4 colors, depending on what I'm doing with the background. They blend pretty nice. You've got to put down your a light coat of maybe your complementary color in, and then you come back over with you pick like your main color and you blend the whole thing in afterwards. So midway through the background usually looks really terrible because it looks like a bunch of scribbles, because you're just sort of lightly coloring here and there. You know, maybe you're putting a halo around the top of the tree, or you're it's a sunset or something, so you're trying to ombre it. So it does look pretty messy sometimes. And then when you come in with your final color, you just really blend it in.
Hi, Jen. Looks like you're covering everything with your colored pencils. If you're doing that when you were doing the sketching with the pencil, why did you cover all the page? Because you're going to cover everything with your colored pencils anyway.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. I just like a really full image. It's just, I don't know. I think it's just a feeling. Sorry, I'm mixing up my colors a little bit here. All right, I'm gonna see if I can get some more of this color so I can get a really good blending strip for you. I feel like the blended strip here doesn't really accurately show that.
You have us curious now about the colors you'll choose for the flowers, because you mentioned that that's a difficult choice.
Yeah, I usually like something that will really pop. So this one with the orange and the purple, I'll probably go with like yellow in the flowers. A lot of times I like to do the hydrangeas in purple and blue, but I don't think that would look very good with this particular color palette. So I'm guessing I would probably go orange and yellow. You can see here, this purple is really dark. And it almost looks like the brown. But when you come back with the blender, it'll pop out. Like it'll lighten it up. It'll lighten all the browns up, and that's where you can see the contrast. That was the real trick I started learning when I started working with this medium, is trying to work out my color schemes, because when you put them down, they are so dark. And then you got to come back and you scrape it off, blend it in. You don't always have an accurate picture of what that's going to look like. I do now more than I used to, because I've been doing it for a couple of years now. But when I first started, I was really, took me a long time to decide on the colors and to kind of figure out what I was going to get when this is all done, as far as a look. Feel like I left orange out. I'm usually a little more structured about this. I'm feel like I've kind of lost my pattern a little bit. That's the other thing I learned, is I always have a pile of the same color handy, especially on the big ones. It's another thing that happened. I got halfway through coloring something and ran out of my color, and I had to run to the store. And they were out of color, and I had to order one online, and it took forever, and I was like, dang it. So now, like, I have a huge pile of color pencils at home, but I will rifle through my giant box of pencils and line up all the colors and make sure I have backup. And if I don't, I will swap out a color before I start, because I'm like, there is nothing more depressing than running out of your color and having to wait 3 weeks to finish your drawing. And I also have color pencil, a holder for when they get too short. Another very important tool. I'm gonna just fill in this little part here, and then I'll go back and blend it and see what we got here. If I can demonstrate that better. And you can kind of see it, the blending. Like I said, this board is a little bit, the texture is a little bit off from what I'm normally work with. And you can see, if you see the original drawings up close, you can see the textures of the boards. And they do add a certain character, and a certain amount of it is sort of out of your hands.
Hi, Jan, you mentioned that it takes about a few days to finish a painting, but in terms of hours for a painting of this size, like how many hours does it take you from
For this one,
start to, to end?
I would say this one's probably 8 hours, maybe,
Okay.
maybe a little less.
Going back over your idea for your bark, do you actually follow a pattern, let's say like A, B, D, D, or, actually have your colors going in a certain order?
I do.
So like you'd have like the brown, the pumpkin, and then the chestnut, and then you would repeat it so that.
Yep. Yeah, it's exactly. I kind of lost my pattern a little bit on this one. talking, but yeah, that's how I usually do. I just lay them down there and I keep going. And if, yeah, and it breaks up as you go through because you said some lines will dead end or you start going around a window. And you got to break your pattern, but I do follow the pattern for the most part. It's the blending that really takes a long time. And this is a kind of a difficult board here.
When you pick out your colors, do you like draw them together to get a feel of how it will look like when they come together? Or you already know in your head with all these colors, it will be good or
I usually just do the like this, like a swap or a swatch. And I kind of already know because I've been working on these for so long. I mean, sometimes I'll add in a color I'm not familiar with just for fun. But usually I have a pretty good idea. I don't know if you're able to see like how that looks or not. And if you can even tell the difference with the blending or not. So you can see here, maybe you can see it. There's like with the texture of the pen or pencil, that there's like white spots, like it doesn't work into the surface. And that's like the blending pencils really kind of do that. And you can also go back over if you want to get like a little bit of more texture or shading. This is really good for like, say, I want to lighten this up maybe. And I can go through and I do that on the leaves a lot, like create a lot more texture, definition by going back over like that. And basically you're just scraping off more color. And it kind of helps create more depth. So like here. The other thing I like with the colors is I do like to do opposites, but then I also will pick colors that are close to each other, but not exactly, so that it just adds a little bit of character where something looks almost like it matches, but doesn't. I really like to do that with the flowers. If I have a patch of, say, pink flowers, I'll use all the pinks. And each flower will be just slightly different color. And that's a really good way to kind of give more depth and more interest in it. So even though I like opposites, I also pick stuff that's almost the same for things that are next to each other. The other thing that you could do when you're doing these is you can play textures against each other. So if you've got like all these verticals, like the tree bark, then when you come down to something, another element, you can go with a really radically different color and it you're setting off the pattern, but it kind of highlights it, even though there's a textural difference, it also really pops with the color. So I like to do that a lot too. Right, so.
Can you tell us a little bit about the pencil sharpeners? Do you have a favorite so that the leads don't break off?
Yeah, I try to stick with make sure it's sharp is all. I just buy these little metal ones. And like they do go dull, so you have to, I usually, if I go to the store and buy pencils, I just grab maybe 3 or 4 more sharpeners. And I just use them until go buy more pencils. I'm not very organized about that, but yeah, the dull pencil sharpeners, after a while, they're no good anymore.
Jen, I see you're brushing as you draw. Is it just that excess that you're brushing off? Is it a certain kind of a brush?
It's just a drafting brush, and yeah, it's excess. You get like little crumbs.
And then that's just kind of falling on your lap, or is that just, does it make a mess or?
I do. That's why I only color out in the studio. I'm not allowed to color in the house.
Okay. All right.
Cause yeah, it's messy. Sorry, I made a mess. To vacuum the floor. I did one, and some of the different colors are way worse than others, but I was out coloring in the studio one day, and there's a particular green I like that just stains everything. It ruined my shoes, which was okay because they're ugly shoes anyways. It stained the floor. So yeah, I don't do it in the house at all. I feel like you guys might start sleeping pretty soon. It's not very exciting. Yeah, I can do that.
If you could repeat the question.
I'm sorry. She asked me if I could show her how to color the flowers and the bunnies. All right, so I didn't pick the colors for that yet. But I can do that. Like I said, I thought the flowers were gonna be like a yellow. I'm gonna go with my favorite green. And then sepia. Sepia is like the best color because it's really smooth and blends. And it's great for shading stuff. So every drawing probably has sepia in it. So I like to, with the leaves, I add sepia in the leaves. And a lot of times I'll just do like on my double lines, I'll fill in the space there to give a little profile. And it's not very exacting because I'm going to come back in with my green and I'm going to just blend the crap out of it. So it doesn't have to be very tidy. And I sometimes this is what I've been doing lately. It could change next week, but I've been doing like just half of a leaf so that you get sort of a little dimension. Oop. So,
The material have to put more pressure or less pressure on these?
Probably more pressure.
I'm sorry, if you can repeat the question?
She asked me if, because of the texture of the board, do I need to add more pressure or less pressure? And I said more pressure, but I should correct myself, like for shading, it's really light pressure because I'm gonna come back with my main color. And the whole thing is like, this is really light. I don't want to do like a solid sepia here. I want to have my green sort of shaded. So I'm going lightly over this part. And I'll come back over with the green and do it with a lot of pressure.
But the actual board, does it require more pressure?
Does the board require more pressure? Yes. It does. And that's like part of the blender, like, cause there's, like with the primer and the ink meet, when I've drawn the drawing, sometimes there'll be gaps with the color. And you want to fill those gaps in. Like I get kind of crazy if I'm like, I finished a drawing. I usually come back the next day and like look at it under a bright light. I might touch up a couple things because I'll see speckles of white in there. And I really hate that. Some of my earlier drawings have that. And it drives me nuts when I look at them. So I come back. And it's pretty subtle. I'm probably the only person who sees it. But I don't like it. Sort of like when you bake a cake and it falls. Even though it tastes good, you're still like, it fell though.
Do you have some favorite greens, the names of the Prismacolors, perhaps?
I do. Like peacock green is one of my favorite colors. It's probably in almost every single one. I also use is this the dark green? Yeah, and dark green. Peacock green is my favorite. When I first saw it, I'm like, that's an ugly color. Why would I ever use that? And I decided, I think it was short of a different green that day, and I decided to use it. And it turned out really beautiful. So I had to take it back, that it was an ugly color. All right, so before I do the green, I'm going to do I call them hydrangeas, but they're not really, I don't know, they're sort of made up looking flowers. They're hydrangea inspired. And I like to use a couple different colors on these. And the blending on these is really the secret to what they end up looking like. Because that's when you really dig in with the blender pencil and create textures. So I'm going to color this and it's going to look really, really terrible. And then I'm going to come back with the blender and that's when it gets really nice. So it's sort of like magic. If you've ever done like stained glass windows, I don't know where my brush went. There it is. Found it. Sort of like you do a piece and you don't really know what it looks like till you like hold it up to the glass or to the light. The glass looks completely different. I kind of think of it like that. There's my yellow. I'm going to take my favorite color green here. That used to be my least favorite color. See, you can see like, that some of the color just doesn't take real well, like along the ink lines and stuff. And I'm mashing it in pretty hard right now. Because I really want to fill all the voids in the surface. I want to blend that sepia in there. Like I said, it looks pretty gross right now because it's all kind of crusty looking. But when you take the blender and you come back, it really just transforms it. So when I do these, partly because it does take so long, I'll do like a whole patch, like I'll do all the flowers and leaves like this. And then I'll go back and do a different section. So this would be like how I work at home, with just doing a patch of flowers. I usually do the tree first in completion. I think because that sets the tone for the rest of the piece, like however the tree turns out kind of spells out the colors for the flowers. So I'll start doing some of these leaves so I don't have to sit here and watch. So I'll do this section over. But you can see like there's a definite texture in this board. You can't see it until you start coloring it. And that's one of the sort of weird challenges, because some boards do not do that. I think this is the green that ruined my shoes. Pretty sure.
Jennifer, is that a color you're using to blend that with?
No, this is the colorless blender.
Oh, okay. That wasn't. Okay.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Is that part of the pencils you get? Is that the first?
So she's asking if that comes with the colored pencils or if it's a separate purchase.
I would say it's a separate purchase. It is part of the color pencil sort of palette. But I buy all my color pencils individually.
Oh, okay.
Because if you buy a box of pencils, you get one of every color. Some of those colors I don't use. And some of the colors, a big drawing might take 4 of the same color. So I started doing an inventory, like when my pencils start looking low or I start running out of colors, I have an inventory sheet of all the colors, and you have to get out a glass of wine, turn on the TV, and I just go through and take inventory of whatever I've got. And then I'll go and order whatever I need so that I have, say, 5 of every color or something. And I do that not very often, but periodically.
Is there a certain brand of pencils you like?
The brand of color pencils I like is Prismacolor.
Jen, well, obviously you're working small because of the time that you have today, but what's your favorite size that you usually work with on the panel?
My favorite size of drawing, I would say probably around 24 inches by 24 inches. It's, or, you know, I've been doing that.
Is
That's
that, what is
20
that?
by 30 over there.
What's the largest?
20 by 30 is the
20 by
largest
30 is
I've
the
done
largest.
today. But I'm getting ready to do a 24 by 48. I know, my husband's like, you're never gonna finish that. And I'm like, I'll show you. You told me I couldn't do this either.
Do you use any kind of sealant
I do.
after you finished your piece?
I do. I meant to show you that. I use workable fixative afterwards. And it works. I had a piece hanging in a little retail space, and I went to swap out the art and I picked it up one day. And so when I got it home, one of the pieces had a sticker on it, on the face of it, and I couldn't get the sticker off. I was pretty mad. And I'm like, how do I get this sticker off? I didn't want to scrape it off with a razor. I knew I would scrape up my finish. And I was like, well, I decided to try Goo Gone because I was like, well, if I can't get the sticker off, it's ruined anyways. Might as well try this and see what happens. And it works. I Goo Goned it off, and the finish on the drawing was not messed up. It remained beautiful. So you can see the difference in the leaves there, for the blended and the non-blended. You know, like I can say I want this to look lighter. I just work at it a little bit longer.
Can you talk about your frames?
Yeah, I use
I'm sorry, the question was about framing?
yeah, can I talk about my frames? So I use frames that are intended for canvases, so they're called floater frames. I really like that look. Part of the joy of not working in paper is that I don't have to use glass or matting. So I use those. I order them online because you can order any size you want. And I picked out a frame that I just like to use over and over again. So it makes it easy. I'm like, okay, I'm low on frames. I'll order, a few frames all at once. So I get the free shipping. And in the sizes that I typically do, I repeat sizes. And I have to modify the way that I attach the pieces to the frames. They don't bolt in like the canvases do, because this is a thinner medium. So I have to buy special L angles that will work. It's not very complicated, but it is sort of a modification. So you can see in the colors too, like once I blended my colors, I did 3 colors in here. But then I go back further and I really like blend out color just on certain leaves or petals. And it gives it extra texture that I think is really nice. And even like you look at the board and there's this weird texture in here. It's the flaw of the board that I was kind of complaining about because it's still here. When you get the bigger shapes for the leaves, that color or that texture really telegraphs through. It used to really make me mad. But I kind of like it. It adds a little character. And it really feels more like a painting when you're done, which I kind of like. But you do really have to work with it. Like you can't just be like, just color it and go. You got to kind of work with it a little bit, blend it, and sometimes it does things you don't want it to do. You kind of have to live with it a little bit. But it kind of goes along with, like, say if you buy furniture that's slightly used and it has some wear, that can be charming or it can be terrible. I don't mind that in my furniture, so I kind of look at it the same way when I'm drawing sometimes, like, okay, I got this weird thing going on. I'm gonna work with it.
Jennifer, I'm going to switch the camera because someone's asked to see the framed piece.
Okay.
I don't know how close we can get to that. And I don't know if you have a couple other framed pieces as well. I don't know if you want to bring those directly under the camera and talk about anything
We can,
related to those.
yeah, I can do that. You put them under here, you're saying?
Yes, directly under the camera. Like that.
Yeah, we can do that. On my shavings. Right. Let's see, this. Oh, I can't see it up there. Like, where is it? Up there. Looks like there's a, it's hard to see. All right. Okay. There we go. So yeah, here you can see the frame. It's a floater frame, so it a canvas would normally go in here and the piece would appear to float inside. So I did that here, but I had to use L brackets that are a little bit taller so that it pushes the piece up further because it's a 1/2 inch board. This piece is recently finished. I think I did this like in March. I just thought it was, I don't know where the idea came from, but the idea that all the animals are doing their laundry and they have to take off their fur, you know, so they're all naked, just made me laugh. You know, we got the little modest one here peeking out. Got I think we have some cats, one cat here. I thought about making the fish naked, but then that would just be skeletons. I thought that was gross, so I didn't do it. I don't know. It just amused me that they're all in their houses hiding because they're naked. And I did think of like the old cities where they had all the laundry hanging out the windows. So that was kind of the feeling I was trying to evoke there. I've gotten a lot of comments that people want to hang this in their laundry room. I'll show you the other one. This is an older piece. Probably a couple years old now. This was a lot of fun to do. This is my first pine tree that I did, or pine tree inspired. And I just thought it was funny. What if possums grew on trees? And so I did put this in a show and I had to write a statement, which is my least favorite part of shows. And so my statement was a recipe on how to cook possums. And I thought, well, they'll either think it's funny or they will kick me out of the show. They didn't kick me out of the show, so somebody else must have thought it was funny too. There's just all sorts of little possums hidden in here, like in the flowers. Put them up here. They carry their babies on their backs, so I thought that was funny. I think this is the first possum inspired work.
So Jennifer, of course, we're interested. Where can we buy your artwork?
You can buy my artwork on my website, which is artbyjennifer.online. I did not bring cards. I should have, I guess.
You did give me a website to post in the follow-up email, so that will take us to a place where we can inquire about things. Is that correct?
It's all listed on there with the prices, and like if it's, you know, I don't put a link on there for sale because if it's somebody in California, you know, I still have to ship it, but if it's somebody close by, I deliver usually. And then I have prints and stuff too, so I'm always available if someone reaches out to me. Like if I don't have something, I can probably get it. Or it's in the works because I'm always making stuff, but.
Any other questions from our in-person audience? Yes, just a moment.
Just coming.
So besides selling your work on their website, do you do art shows?
Yeah, I just did one Art in the Barn.
Art in the Barn?
Yeah, I don't do a ton of art shows.
Like fairs and.
Yeah, I don't have a tent. Not that I couldn't get a tent, but I'm a little bit hesitant about going outside with art in case there's a storm.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, just a moment.
Why do you use a workable fixative as opposed to just a fixative?
I don't know.
That's what you use now.
Hmm?
Okay, that is just what you ended up using and it
Yeah.
stayed that way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because you really aren't using a fixative and then putting something on top.
I'm
of
not,
it.
no.
Yeah.
I
It is
did though,
fine.
when I first started, I did experiment with that and it really impacts the color pencils. So I quit, I do it at the very end. And I do it more to just protect it than anything else. And it's not to say that I won't use something else, but this is what I started using and I just kept using it.
And so to repeat, because someone was asking, you are still a full-time architect, so you do this mostly on the weekends.
Yeah.
About maybe, how many hours a week do you spend?
If I've got the full weekend, I usually spend the full weekend working on art. And I do like any miscellaneous website stuff in the evenings, usually. If I'm not working on something, my husband thinks I'm sick. He's just like, uh-oh, what's happening?
And maybe you told us before, your typical size of piece, about how many hours, do you have a guess to how many hours that takes?
Yeah, I did track that for a little bit just out of curiosity. And so a 24 by 24 will take about 100 hours total, start to finish. And that one took extra time because of all those little flowers. Really spent a long time on those flowers.
Okay, any other questions? Any last words of wisdom for us? I will be sending out 2 follow-up emails following tonight's program, one tonight with additional resources, including a link to Jennifer's website. And then we did have the privilege of recording tonight's program, so I will send a second follow-up email in about a week that has the direct link to the recording. And Jennifer's going to send us maybe the piece a little bit further along if she chooses to, and then we'll add that as a long still shot to the end of the recording.
Yeah, I'll try to finish it.
No pressure. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.